For 20 years, Michael Bennett believed his younger sister wanted nothing to do with their family, because that was the story he had been told since he was 19 years old. He never questioned it deeply, never pushed for details, simply accepted the version of events handed to him at the dinner table and moved on with his life. But one afternoon, while going through his late father's belongings, Michael found a small stack of returned letters, all addressed to his sister, all marked as undeliverable, and every single one of them had been opened and resealed long before being mailed back. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Michael Bennett grew up in a modest house outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, the oldest of two children in a family that valued appearances and rarely spoke about anything uncomfortable. His sister, Rachel, was 7 years younger, a bright and curious girl who never quite fit the mold their parents expected of her. Where Michael followed the rules without question, Rachel asked too many questions, dressed differently, and eventually fell in love with a man their parents disapproved of for reasons Michael was never given in full. When Rachel was 19, she left the house after a fight nobody would fully explain to him. And within a year, their parents told Michael that Rachel had cut off all contact with the family entirely, choosing her own life over the people who raised her. For the next 2 decades, that was simply the truth as far as Michael understood it. His parents spoke of Rachel rarely, and always with a tone of quiet disappointment, as though her absence confirmed something they had suspected about her all along. Michael sent a handful of letters over the years to an old address he found in his mother's address book, never receiving a reply, which only reinforced what he had been told. He built his own life, married, had 2 children of his own, and the space where his sister should have been simply became a fact he stopped questioning. The way people stop questioning the shape of a room they have lived in their entire life. When Michael's father passed away last spring, the task of clearing out the family house fell mostly to him, since his mother had passed several years earlier and there was no one else left to do it. In the back of a hallway closet, tucked inside an old shoebox similar to countless others filled with tax documents and warranties, Michael found a stack of nearly a dozen envelopes, each one addressed to Rachel at a Denver address he had never seen before, each one stamped and marked as returned to sender, and each one already opened along the seal before being resealed with a thin line of tape. Michael sat on the floor of that closet for nearly an hour, turning the envelopes over in his hands, trying to make sense of what he was looking at. These were not old, faded letters from decades past. Several of the postmarks were recent, some from just the past 3 years, meaning his father had been writing to Rachel, receiving something back, opening it himself, and then resealing and discarding what should have been his sister's replies, all while telling Michael that Rachel wanted nothing to do with any of them. The implications sat heavy in his chest, a slow-building realization that everything he believed about his sister's absence might have been carefully managed rather than freely chosen. Michael spent the following weeks doing something he had never seriously attempted in 20 years, actually searching for his sister rather than accepting her silence as fact. He found an old friend of Rachel's through a mutual contact from high school, who confirmed that Rachel had, in fact, tried reaching out to the family multiple times over the years, only to receive cold, dismissive responses that convinced her the door was permanently closed. Rachel had eventually stopped trying, believing the family had truly moved on without her, unaware that many of her attempts likely never made it past her father's careful interception. The friend gave Michael a current phone number, one she had used recently, and for 3 days Michael stared at that number before finally working up the courage to call. When Rachel answered, there was a long pause on both ends of the line, neither of them certain what to say to a sibling separated by 20 years and a story neither of them had fully understood. Michael explained what he had found in the closet, his voice breaking as he described the resealed envelopes and the recent postmarks. Rachel grew quiet, then admitted she had written to their father as recently as 2 years earlier, hoping for even a small opening, only to receive nothing back, which she had interpreted as final confirmation that reconciliation was impossible. Hearing that her letters had likely never truly reached anyone who could respond honestly left her stunned into a long, heavy silence. They agreed to meet in person for the first time in 2 decades, choosing neutral ground at a small coffee shop halfway between Tulsa and Denver. Michael arrived early, nervous in a way he had not felt since his own wedding day, uncertain whether the sister he remembered as a 19-year-old girl would recognize the man he had become, or whether either of them would know how to bridge 20 years of assumed silence. When Rachel walked in, older now, more guarded, but unmistakably his sister, neither of them said much at first. They simply stood there for a long moment before Rachel stepped forward and hugged him, both of them holding on far longer than either had expected. Over the following months, Michael and Rachel slowly rebuilt what 20 years of misunderstanding had eroded, piecing together the full picture of how much had been kept from both of them by a father unwilling to let go of his own disappointment. There was grief in the process, grief for the birthdays missed, the children who grew up without knowing their aunt or uncle, the version of family life that could never fully be recovered. But there was also something neither of them expected to find again. A sibling relationship rebuilt not on old assumptions, but on a shared understanding of how easily a story can be shaped by silence and a few carefully hidden envelopes. Looking back, Michael often says the hardest part was not discovering what his father had done, but confronting how easily he had accepted 20 years of distance without ever truly questioning it himself. He had built an entire understanding of his sister around a story he never verified, simply because it was easier than asking uncomfortable questions. If there is one thing worth taking from Michael and Rachel's story, it is a reminder that the version of events we accept from others is not always the full truth, and that sometimes the people we assume walked away were never given the choice to stay. What would you have done if you found those envelopes in your own father's closet? And how long would it have taken you to make that first call? Subscribe if you believe it is never too late to question the story you were told.